All right. An example. So you might already know some examples of different companies that are fully remote. But one of the examples in our resources that we had looked at was a company called GitLab. So this is a company that started in 2011. They had 7 people fully remote from the very beginning, right? So 7 people, you're like, okay, yeah, fully remote, definitely doable. All right. As of 2023, they had 2,100 employees across 60 countries. So no dedicated office space anywhere in the world. All right. And so how do they do it? They're like, okay, we have a set of norms, some systems, processes, so they can enable their global workforce to collaborate across all these different time zones and schedules. One of the big things is the asynchronous thing that we're talking about. When you're talking about global, synchronous can be very difficult. I don't think I mentioned this earlier when we introduced the concepts. For us, we do a lot of asynchronous, but we're mostly like working in our United States time zone for the most part. So, you know, it could be 2 hours, I think 3 hours at the most, it would be the difference that we're working with. And so that's pretty easy to navigate. But when you start looking at global, those time zones can be very extreme. And so it can be very difficult. So you have to look at what are some ways that, people can work more successfully asynchronously, because the synchronous is going to be for very, very special occasions, because sometimes the overlap is not really convenient for everybody. Somebody has to either say, okay, I'm going to meet a lot later or a lot earlier than I normally would. One of the strategies that they use is they have an online handbook for the company, and it's 2,700 pages. Everybody's able to access this. So anytime somebody has a question or maybe they find an answer to something, they have I guess think of it kind of like a huge, like a Wikipedia type of a thing where, anything you'd want to know about the company, you can go there, look at it. And we actually used something similar when we were helping with a virtual conference. We had set up like a conference FAQ for that exact reason, because we were like, okay, there's lots of questions that people might have. We had a small team that we were working with to manage the conference. And so we set that up and did our best to direct people like, hey, go here and look here first, and kept reinforcing that throughout the event before you ask a question. And then if somebody asked a question that we didn't have in the FAQ, we immediately, hey, let's pop this in the FAQ so it's there for the next person that might ask that.
Yeah.
So thoughts on this?
Yeah. One of the things that struck me as you start to frame it as a global organization, this is the one where we got the quote I mentioned earlier of working remotely is easy. The challenge is working asynchronously. And I think one of the keys is what they did here in not just focusing on answering each little question, but developing a system. Because once you have that, you need a system for communication, and you think of it as whoever the employee is, whatever their level, their function, their location, they're going to need to be able to both consume and create information, most likely. And so, how do you do that so you don't end up with information siloed just in one person in one time zone and no one else knows about this? So, I think in this example, it was just a beautiful example of doing that and thinking of in a system. So, that's what really struck me. Instead of just how would one person do it, how would you do it as a system? And I think that's key to growing from a small group into a global team. So that's one of the things that did stand out for me. And the other part that I was really, that I think they did so intentionally was that the informal communication, because that to me, I think of that as the glue. Those interpersonal connections that they talk about, your EQ, those soft skills, those are going to have to be nurtured. And how are you going to do that? And so they talked about in the onboarding process, I love this so much that they teach people how and how often to communicate with each other. So I thought that was really beautiful. And like that each new hire initiates 5 virtual coffee chats so that they learn that it's normal to schedule meetings just to connect, whether it's work related or not. And so I think of that as, and I know some places where you hear your work is your family. I don't buy into all of that, but there is a collegiality to it. And people that do enjoy the people that they work with show more satisfaction at work. So there is definitely a value to it. We're not taking to supplant your family. The workers are not your family. But I thought it was really nice that they had that system for everything. And for new people to know it's okay to reach out and that it's okay to have just like a little virtual coffee. I thought that was really something to be that explicit about. So sometimes though things like that are like hidden norms that nobody tells you, but you just kind of have to figure out after a while. And some of those are much easier to figure out in person when you can read the environment. But if you're fully remote, then you need to explicitly say that.
Yeah, and like we mentioned before, I think this is where fully remote, I think people that in person, people that go to an office can take some cues from fully remote because fully remote, they're having to be more intentional. Everybody's spread out. So they're thinking through these things. And I'm like, okay, as a best practice, it probably would be good to have some type of company handbook that was easily accessible where people could look for questions, especially like you're a new hire, you're new to the company, you're new to the organization. Even though there might be somebody you could ask every single question to, it's what's the saying? Teach a person to fish or feed a fish. It's kind of like teach them, hey, when you have a question, this is your first go to. And then if that's confusing or it's nuanced, like you don't really see it reflected in there, then ask somebody to clarify or something like that. And then the whole mentor thing, there's so many times people get hired in a company and they're like, they do like the box check onboarding type videos and stuff. And then it's okay, well, you'll kind of figure it out after a while. I'll figure it out. But then there's some people that are like, okay, I could figure this out a lot quicker if I had a go-to person that was checking in on me, that was making sure I understand things, that was helping make me feel welcome and part of the team here, and not just you'll probably be gone in a week. And it's like, what now? What's happening?
One of the things in their example to was that with the virtual coffee chats, when you think about the bonding that happens in that synchronous time. All right. So we're going to have coffee. That's a great bonding time. And then, which is going to connect back into the graphic that you dropped in yesterday that you saw on LinkedIn of like where asynchronous communications are weak. So they're some things where they're very strong. So you think of asynchronous, they're great for bridging time zones. Fantastic. Like synchronous can't do that. We can't be 2 time zones at the same time and one's in the middle of the night, one's in the morning. Not the strength. But where asynchronous is weak is customer facing jobs. This is from the graphic, emotional topics, urgent, unpredictable events, deep bonding, and brainstorming. So, with that, have you had any additional thoughts? I know we chatted a bit about this yesterday.
The example I gave earlier, there were, what it doesn't necessarily fit into one of these specific boxes, but like we needed to negotiate a time to do something. And we could have done that asynchronously, but it would have been weak. It would have been a lot of back and forth. It was just easier to jump on a call for 15 to 20 minutes and hash it out and figure it out. And same thing with brainstorming. You could do it, but it's not going to be, it's probably not, when you're brainstorming things too. I mean, heck, we were going back and forth about something today that was not like, was just about like, hey, I saw this. And there was lots of questions. It was like, well, what do you mean by this? What do so it's like brainstorming. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's not going to be as good.
Yeah, it's so much easier to get clarification on if you're unclear on something. You're like, wait, what is this? What do you mean by like last? Is that the top one? Is that the bottom one? Which of those? And I was thinking on the example of an emotional topic that can go either way to where you're like, oh, we need some time to let some time pass and then we can cool off and then come to it. And I see that more in a synchronous situation because if you have someone who gets activated and then they share something that's just text-based, and then, or maybe it's even a video, but then the other person doesn't respond for an extended length of time, you've got that time in between. You don't get a reaction or a response to whatever your initial emotionally charged message was. And so what happens in between, it can be on both parties. Of There's a lot of space in between for the stories to bubble up. So maybe I'm going to advocate for hybrid for everything. I don't know, Ken. Any other thoughts you have on this one from the GitLab example? Anything else we need to add in?
No, I think we're ready to go into our closing with in person events and measurement.
All right.